والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى.
الحمد لله رب العالمين، له الحمد الحسن والثناء الجميل، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له يقول الحق وهو يهدي السبيل، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. There's a few points I organized inshallah ta'ala and I wanted to share with you all بإذن الكريم when it comes to حفظ and memorization. So it's something over the years that I collected for my teaching towards my children and for my own memorization of the Qur'an. So it's 8 points, inshallah ta'ala, when it comes to points in order to memorize the Qur'an. And there are 2 things that people are looking for when it comes to Qur'an for themselves and for their children. It's sur'atul hifz wa itqanul Qur'an. You need to memorize it quickly, and also to make that the Qur'an that you've already memorized, to basically keep it and make sure that it's mutqin, and it's perfection. The first point, the first advice I would give is the Qur'an that you're memorizing should be from a mushaf wahid. So the scholars, they call it mushaf muwahhadun fi tab'ihi. Yani the taba'a you're using, the copy that the child's going to use from the mushaf, it should be the one that he started with and the one he finishes with. My children have never changed their mushaf. I made sure that they don't. Their mushaf rips, we work on it, we cover it properly, but that's going to be their mushaf through the entire process of their memorization. Why? Because it helps in rusukh al-hifz. And there's some athar and some kalam. Ibn al-Jawzi mentions some of it in his kitab Sayyid al-Khatir. The second one is the memorization has to be on the hand of ala shaykhin mutqinin, a teacher who's alert, who knows the Qur'an, who's going to not only just correct the child's memorization, but he's also going to correct the child's pronunciation and articulation of words. So that's the second. Okay, because the teacher can hear things. He can see mistakes that the child is making. And the more that the teacher's qualified and more he knows, the more he catches on those mistakes. The third one is لِيَكُنْ حِفْظُكَ يَوْمِيًا. You have to make sure that the memorization of the Qur'an is daily. So it doesn't have to be like a page a day. Whatever you're memorizing, but you should make it daily. The reason why that is because Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, he says al-inqita' يُضَعِّفُ الْحِفْظَ وَيُضَعِّفُ الْهِمَّةِ. If you disconnect from something, it weakens the memorization, and it also weakens what? The aspiration. The continuation is very good. The fourth point is التكرار يا إخوة. Repetition. And Imam al-Bukhari was asked, what is the medicine to memorization? And he said, I don't know anything after the person's willingness better than at-takrar, repetition. So at-takrar, repetition is the key and it's the solution. Honestly, when people ask me, how can I solidify my Quranic memorization? I don't know anything else to say other than takrar, repetition. Number 5, let the memorization start from Surah An-Nas ila Surah Al-Baqarah. That tariqah is the best. Especially the child, he learns quickly to finish surahs from surahs to surahs. Because why is the Qur'an even categorized into surahs? Is when the human feels like he accomplished something and he finished a surah and he's moving to the next, it feels good for the child. I've seen it with my children. Once they finish a portion and they go to the next surah, they like it. I'm starting a new surah, Dad, did you know that? They'll tell you, so they're happy. So Surah An-Nas ila Surah Al-Baqarah, the scholars, they say Hifdul Ibtida, that should be it. Like when it comes to Hifdul Muraja'a, Baqarah ila Nas. When you do Muraja'a, it should start from Baqarah to Nas. But when you're starting the memorization of the Quran, whether you're young, whatever you are, start from Surah An-Nas ila Surah Al-Baqarah. Number 6 is إِذَا ضَاقَ الْوَقْتُ. If there's not much time for memorization, for anything new. So if you're in a situation where time is restricted and you have to choose between learning something new or revising, my advice is muraja'ah. What you've already memorized is more important than something new. So if I see my child, what he's memorized before is weak, I like to stop. I love stopping. And we're going to do muraja'ah. Going forward and just forward and forward and forward is without keeping strong what you memorize is not of a lot of benefit. Number 7. The second 7 point is لا تنتقل من حفظ إلى حفظ. Don't move from one hifz to another hifz. What do I mean by that? Don't move to a jadid unless you solidify the past. Okay, which is what I've already kind of mentioned in the 6th point. And the 8th and final point, inshallah ta'ala, is don't feel heartbroken if the child is still weak after the first time he finishes the Qur'an. Anybody who's memorized the Qur'an and finished the Qur'an will know that their first memorization wasn't that strong. That's why the scholars, they call it حفظ التجميع. You just compile the Qur'an. You haven't really memorized it properly. And that's why مرحلة التجميع, that stage of just all the Qur'an, is going to be ضعيف. So when your child says, I finished the Qur'an and you can still see mistakes, don't worry. He's going to start feeling like he's finished the Qur'an on the 4th and the 5th time. That's in terms of principles and rulings I wanted to mention here. Now I want to mention the second point, which is مقدار الحفظ اليومي. How much should a child memorize every day? Okay, that's what a teacher should appoint the child. This is not a test. This is not a competition. He's not racing with anybody. Allah hasn't made the people's hifz the same. Someone's hifz is very strong, another one is hifz is very weak. So it changes from one person. I initially started my children with half a page, and we made our way from there. So we started with half a page, and we made our way up. But if a child is memorizing a page, that's decent, that's good. That's not very bad, as some people may say. It's decent, it's all right. The more the better. But if he's doing a page a day, that's good. But that page has to be mutqin. And very well he has to read it to you. Of course, he's a child. He's going to forget it after a few months later. He's going to forget again. Your job is just to keep going over it again and again and again. The second point I want to say is, my advice is don't increase the child's hifz more than 2 pages. It's one of the things I did wrong. It's one of the mistakes that I did. I was going fast to finish it, so I got 4 pages, 5 pages squeezed in. That's not a good advice. I realized لا تزيد, don't increase from صفحتين to صفحة, because there's it's no race. And these are just personal advices, because the scholars, there's a qaida I came across, من حفظ سريعا نسي سريعا. That's the qaida. Anyone who memorizes fast forgets it fast. Last point, inshallah ta'ala, and then we can take the Q&As, inshallah ta'ala, whatever's left over. طريقة حفظ القرآن, when it comes to the method of memorizing the Quran, as I said, when we say memorization of the Quran, is 2 things we're trying to look for. سريع الحفظ, fast in memorization, سرعة الحفظ, and itqan. We want to get those 2 together, inshallah ta'ala. So as fast as the person can memorize and also have it strong, there are basically few things that a person needs to observe. The first thing we have to keep in mind is that the Quran is divided into 2 when it comes to memorization. Ayat which are known as ayat mutashabiha. Ayat that are look-alike. Those are tricky. And ayat which are not mutashabih. They don't resemble one another. A person who memorizes the Quran, what tricks him a lot and catches him off guard is the ayat which are mutashabiha. I think that could be another discussion in another time, how to do it. There's a lot of people who've now started to buy books that have all of those ayat mutashabih and they try to memorize it from it. I'm anti that. I'm not for that. I like the ayat mutashabih to be learned from the Quran yourself. You start picking up those ayat mutashabih. So you're reading Surah Qasas and you see the story of Musa alayhi salam be mentioned here, it's similar to Surah Taha, وهكذا. Surah Sad is mentioning the story of Iblis, and then Surah Al-A'raf is also mentioning the story of Adam and Iblis, and Surah Al-Baqarah is also mentioning it, and so then it resembles one another. I like to see it myself, and I pick up the differences. I think that's but like in one time, being given the entire ayat, mutashabiha ayat that look alike, and you're told to memorize it as a list, it doesn't last long. But again, it changes from one person to another. So these are the steps I took with my kids when it came to the method of memorizing the Qur'an. Each ayah, I made them read it 20 times. So for example, the child reads Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. He reads it 20 times looking at the Mus'haf. Now when he reads it 20 times looking at it from the Mus'haf, I put my hand on it and I say, hey, read it now from memory. So my son or my daughter, she reads it from memory 20 times. And then I now say, okay, let's move on to the next ayah. Look at the ayah again, read it 20 times from the Mus'haf. Let me hear it 20 times. And then I tell them, I put my hand on it and I say, read it 20 times from memory. If it happens within those 20 times, if they do one time mistake, we have to read it again from looking 20 times. I need 20 pure, no mistakes. If they do one time mistake, we go back again from looking. Now, when they do two ayahs, so Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, those are two verses, 20 times. So it's 40. I put my hand on it both and I say, I need you to read those two verses together now. Okay, and they read it together, and that's how we carry on connecting all the verses together. If it happens that whatever verse they get wrong, we put our hand on it again and we say, read it 20 times. Because when it comes to memorizing, there's two things that happen. You know the verse, but you forget the verse after it. So its connection is also important. That's why I keep bringing it back to the previous one. And I keep bringing it back to the previous one. And I keep bringing it back to the previous one. So there's a connection between the ayat. Some people, what they do is they memorize this verse, and they move into the next 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 verse. And what happens is they can't connect the verses. They know each verse by itself, but they're not connecting it. So I need it to be connected. Another thing I focus highly on, and it's one of the things you can trick a person who's a hafiz, is the ending of an ayah from a safha to the other page that it connects with. A lot of people get confused here. Again, it comes to the issue of what? Connecting. And this, I make sure my children don't do that mistake, because we make sure that we spend a lot of time with the last verse on the page to the verse that's starting on the other page. Now, this is very important in a matter I mentioned before, which is do not change the copies of your mushaf. If you do, some of the mushafs are different with ayah starts in the page. And that's not what you want for the child. You don't want tashattut to happen to the child. And inshallah ta'ala, that's all I wanted to share for now. And Allah knows best subhanahu wa ta'ala.